everyone, it's Leela from Miss Kiss Creations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be this beautiful American flag tumbler. This is a rustic American flag look. Before I get started on this tutorial, I did want to go over a couple things with y'all. The first 30 seconds or so of the video, the camera did mess up on me, so the frame is a lot smaller than the full screen, so please bear with me with that. After the 30 seconds, the video is fine all the way through. Another thing I want to mention is this tumbler that you see here, this is all spray paint. The flag, everything is spray paint and alcohol ink or acrylic paint. So this is a template and you'll see that I created that in my video. So everything that's left behind on this tumbler is all spray paint. There is no vinyl on this tumbler right now. For all of my beginners to vinyl or Cricut Design Space, I did go over how I created my template, how I found it on Google, how I put it on Cricut Design Space, and how I cut it. For my more advanced viewers, you can go ahead and skip through that and move right on to when I place the template on the tumbler and continue to watch the video from there. My followers, y'all have been asking me about this tumbler for about a month now, so I'm so happy that I'm able to show you how I created my version of it. And if you guys have any other ideas or any other tumblers you want me to create, be sure to post it in my comments below and I'll make sure to read every single one. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial. I am working with a 30-ounce stainless steel tumbler. The brand is Built. I did purchase this tumbler from Walmart. This cost me about $8 to $9. This tumbler did not come white. This tumbler is actually stainless steel. I went ahead and I sanded this tumbler down with 180 grit sandpaper, and then I went ahead and I wiped it down with my 91% alcohol. After I wiped it down with 91% alcohol, I took my white flat Rust-Oleum spray paint and I spray painted the entire tumbler. Make sure you let your tumbler spray paint dry for 24 hours. The reason for that is because when I take up my stencil or my temporary vinyl, I don't want this white to peel up with the vinyl or the stencil. I'm now going to create my American flag template for my tumbler. You're going to want to open a new project on your Cricut Design Space. And you're also going to want to open Internet Explorer and go ahead and Google American flag SVG. Select any American flag SVG that you would like. I just use a standard American flag. You can type in distressed American flag. However you want to create your design is up to you. So I saved this American flag and I just save picture as, and then you save it to the file that you want it to be saved to. Then you go back to your Cricut Design Space. On the left bottom corner on your project, you're going to click upload. You're going to upload a image, browse, and then you're going to select your American flag. I'm just going to select complex for this image. There's only 2 colors on this image, and then continue. You're going to select your select and erase tool, and you're just wanting to clean up this image as best as you can. So I went ahead and I clicked the background, and that takes away all of the white in the background. And now for the stars, you also want the stars to be whited out as well, or you want them to be cut out as well. So you're going to go through the flag and you're going to completely get rid of all of the excess white inside of the flag. Once you have all of your stars completely removed from the flag, what I do is I like to do a quick preview on here. This just allows you to see your image in the cut version, so you can see that you have all of your stars cut out. So I'm going to hide preview, and then I'm going to click continue, and then you're going to save your image. You can either save it as a print then cut or a cut image. It does not matter which way you save this. You can always change this once it is saved. So I'm just going to save it as American flag, SVG, and then type flag for my tag. So if I type in flag, I'm also going to type in July 4th as well. If I go to search July 4th, this flag will also come up. So now I'm going to save this, and then it's going to upload, select the photo, and I want it to be uploaded into my design space, into my project. And then now I have my American flag. If you have Cricut access, you have access to all of the Cricut's images. You can always go to your images on your project and type in American flag, and they have a lot of options to choose from. So I'm going to go ahead and insert this, and you can see that they do have an American flag SVG already cleaned up for you, and this looks a lot neater than an image that you might find on Google. You can also purchase a cleaned up American flag on Etsy. Just make sure, if you are selling these tumblers, please make sure to read the rights of your image that you do purchase. You're now going to want to measure around your tumbler. If you are working with a tumbler like me, where it is bigger one part of the tumbler and smaller on the other part, make sure you are measuring around the biggest or widest part of the tumbler. So make sure you're measuring that diameter, because you do want to have more than less. So on this built tumbler, it is 12 inches for the diameter, and then from top to bottom, it is a little over 8 inches. Now, I usually work with Ozark trail tumblers. They aren't as tall, and they're a little wider. I do recommend using an Ozark trail tumbler just because they aren't as tall. I think they're about 7 inches, 7.5 inches tall. But if you have this built tumbler on hand, go ahead and use it, and you'll see how I adjust to it. You're now going to adjust the size of your image. So again, my tumbler, the widest part of my tumbler is 12 inches in diameter. So I'm going to try to stretch it to 12 to see if my mat will allow me to cut it. And then the height is about 8 inches. So I'm going to drag it down a little longer to make it about 8 inches here. I'm now going to go to the top right hand corner and select Make It. The file that I have, it's in 2 parts. So the American flag stars are in one part, and then the stripes are in the other part. So what this is telling me is that I have an image that is larger than 11.5, which is the typical cutting size mat. So if you do have a larger mat, go ahead and put this on the larger mat. If you don't, I just go ahead and put this on my regular size mat, and I just let it hang over some, and you'll see that here coming up soon. So just click OK. And then now we're going to set up to cut. Now you do not need to have this red and blue. You can use any color vinyl. Make sure your vinyl is 631 or temporary vinyl. That is the most important, because if you use permanent adhesive vinyl, when you go to take up your template at the end here, you're going to rip up the original white spray paint that we spray painted yesterday. So make sure you are using temporary vinyl for this template so you can peel up the vinyl without peeling up any paint. I'm now going to cut my stars, and again, I am using my 651 vinyl. The vinyl I'm actually using is the Cricut brand, and if you can see here, it says removable premium vinyl underneath the vinyl. If you are using another company, sometimes it will say 631 vinyl. The setting that I have my Cricut machine on is going to be iron-on. I always use iron-on while working with 631 or removable vinyl. I only use that because it is thin and it cuts through it perfectly. I'm now going to cut my stripes on my tumbler, and if you can see that the bottom isn't stuck on the mat, it's kind of overlapping. What I do is I just take 2 pieces of blue or painter's tape, and I place them at the very bottom of my vinyl, like so, And this just keeps the vinyl in place whenever it is cutting, because the cut might go all the way down here. Because remember, my tumbler is a little, it is a little over 11.5 or 12 inches. So I don't want the vinyl moving around. I want it to be stuck in place. I'm now going to be weeding my vinyl. So first I have my star area. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be leaving the stars down. So remember, we're using this as a template. So if I leave the stars down, anywhere that I spray paint, whenever I take the stars up, you're going to see the stars as white. So that's what we're wanting. We're wanting to leave the stars down. And since all these stars are kind of small, what I typically do is I take my weeding tool and I use this side of the tool, and then I take my tool and I kind of rub across the design just so it's easier when I go to peel it up, so the stars won't peel up with the excess vinyl. This way the stars kind of stick to the adhesive better and doesn't want to pull up whenever you go to pull it up. So I'm just going to poke a hole inside of my vinyl, and then I'm going to pull at an angle and making sure all the stars stay on the paper. So far so good. And then what you can do with this template that you have, the excess vinyl, you can keep this to do another project. So you can go ahead and stick this to your desk or something, stick it wherever, and you can save this for another project. But right now, I just want these stars on this paper. And now I'm going to do the same with the stripes. I'm just going to pull up the excess vinyl, leaving the stripes down on the paper. So now I am wanting to put my template on my tumbler. So I have my tumbler here, and the good thing I like about putting this American flag on the 30-ounce tumblers is because whenever you have the stars, it lays perfectly on the top part or the wider part of the tumbler. And I just think it looks really nice. I like a bigger surface whenever there's a lot of stuff going on the tumbler. So this just gets proportioned very nicely. So I'm going to use my transfer tape, and I'm going to place it on top of my stars. And then I'm just going to take my squeegee here and then just place the transfer tape on the template or on my vinyl, and I'm just going to rub around so I can have that vinyl stick to my transfer tape. So I'm now going to place the stars down on the tumbler. The good thing about this tumbler is this is going to be a distressed looking tumbler, so you don't have to do this perfectly. The one thing you have to do is to make sure you're laying these stars down correctly. Correctly meaning make sure the stars are right side up. When I first did this tumbler, I made a boo-boo and I put them down upside down. So make sure you are making sure the points are up. And then we're gonna go ahead and just place this on the tumbler. Again, this is a distressed looking tumbler, so don't overthink this. Where I'm focusing now is basically the stars up top. If these are as straight as I can make it, everything else will be straight. So just focus on lining up the stars, the points on the rim, and everything else will fall into place. So now that it is on the tumbler, I'm now going to press down on my design just to make sure that the stars do stay down whenever I pull up the transfer tape. Once I've pressed down on my transfer tape, I'm now going to pull my transfer tape up at an angle, making sure all the stars stay on the tumbler. If there's some that pull up with the transfer tape, just lay the tape down again and just press down or rub down on the tumbler, and then the stars will come out or will rip off of the transfer tape and stay on the cup. You want to make sure you're doing this very slowly, especially when there's a lot of stuff pulling off of the transfer tape, because one little rip can ruin your entire design, and then you'll have to recut this star design. And here's the stars placed on the tumbler. And now for the next step, I'm going to be placing the stripes on my tumbler. Now, for this part, I won't be using transfer tape for these stripes. I'm going to be freehanding or laying these down without transfer tape. And again, like what I was saying with the stars, remember anything underneath the vinyl will be white. So that being said, if you look at any American flag, go ahead and Google it. The red is always at the top. It never starts with a white stripe. It starts with the red stripe. So I'm going to be leaving some space and then placing my flag or my stripe starting down here and not up here. So the trick is kind of placing the stripe every other one. So let me just show you instead of explaining. I feel that will be a lot easier. So I have my short stripe because I have my stars. So I'm going to be placing my short stripe right where I want it to be placed. Now you can leave a little bit of gap next to the stars because, again, if you look at the stripe doesn't start right on the star. There's kind of a space between. So make sure you leave a space, and this doesn't have to be perfect. I do want it to be as straight as I can get it though, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then there you go. So I laid my stripe down. Again, I'm not going to be leaving this here because if I would go to spray paint this tumbler, I'll rip it up, I'll spray paint this red, I'll rip this up and it's gonna be white. So I want that to be red. But that's going to allow me to kind of have a guideline of where my stripe is going to be placed, of where I'm going to keep it. So now I'm going to place my stripe that will be laid here and stayed here, right underneath the stripe that I have placed. And again, that's just my guideline. And I left a little bit of gap, that's fine. I only do that just so I don't have a lot of space left at the bottom if my measurements were off in the beginning. So now I have my two stripes. I'm now going to peel up my first stripe because I want this to be red. I do not want this to be white whenever I go to spray paint. So make sure you have this peeled up and then you have your stripe. Now I'm going to take this stripe again and I'm going to place it right underneath my stripe that I'm keeping on the tumbler. So you're kind of doing this back and forth until you are finished or until you've run out of stripes on your tumbler. So I'm placing this down as straight as I can get it. I'm leaving a little bit of gap just to make it easier for me. Then I'm going to peel up to my next piece of temporary vinyl stripe, and I'm going to be repeating this process. So now I'm going to lay this, and I'm trying to do it as straight as possible. But again, I love this tumbler because it doesn't have to be perfect. And that distressed look makes it so much easier to make mistakes without people noticing. So now I want red, white, red, white. So I want to take off this because I want this to be red whenever I go to spray paint. So now I have these stripes. I'm going to repeat this process again around the entire tumbler. And so now I'm going to be placing this down. And you don't really have to make it even with here per se. You just want it even, making it around your tumbler. And then now I'm going to be placing another stripe down there. And it's that simple. And so with this one, what I do is I want this to be as a straight square as I can. So I don't want this stripe to be all the way up here. I want to kind of leave it down so I can make this even with the stars. Like on a American flag, this stripe is always even with the star, or as even as it can get, especially since this is going to be distressed. So I try to put this down a little lower, and then we'll go ahead and even out these two, and I'll show you how I do that again. In my opinion, laying down these stripes, it's the hardest process of the tumbler. It's the most tedious, but once you're done with these stripes, it gets a lot easier. So I'm just going to lift this up and I'm just going to lay it down. I have my finger where it was and just kind of eyeball it and kind of lay it down to make those spaces a little bit more even. And I'm just straightening it up. Oops, sorry. I'm just straightening it up here some just to make it even here. I went ahead and I finished this off camera. You want to make sure your vinyl is completely pressed down. So I left this up to show y'all. You don't want this on your tumbler. You want to make sure you press these little areas down right here. I know you can hardly see this, but it is sticking up some. So make sure you press down all of your vinyl around the edges. The reason for that is because when you go to spray paint this, you're going to be getting spray paint all over this tumbler. You don't want spray paint possibly getting underneath the vinyl. You want this to be white and as straight as you can. Now again, this is a distressed look, so if you do get some spray paint, it is fine. It's very hard to mess up this tumbler when it comes to doing that. I do have this crease in my vinyl. This is okay as long as you have this part down and this part down. If you do overlap your vinyl, I cut it a little bit and I overlapped it and it doesn't overlap straight, you can always take a razor blade and just cut right here to make it not look like so much a stencil that you use. But this should be fine. I just take my fingernail, but if it did overlap a lot, go ahead and take that razor blade or X-Acto knife. Just make sure you're not blading it really hard to scrape off this bottom layer of white. So for the next step, you're going to be going into spray painting. You're gonna want your red spray paint and your blue spray paint. The spray paint that I'm using today is Apple Red. It is from Rust-Oleum. It is a satin finish. And then I am using the Satin Iris from Krylon. I don't use any specific brands for spray paint. I do prefer a satin or matte finish for this tumbler, not gloss, just so the epoxy won't repel or create more fisheyes than it might already do. So I just chose the first red and the first blue that I saw, a basic red and a basic blue on the shelf at Walmart. So I have my tumbler here and I typically start with my blue spray paint. Make sure you shake your spray paint well, give it a good shake. And then I'm now going to take my blue and just focus the paint on the star area. So I'm just doing this in small spritz. So this way, I'm not spraying a lot. I'm just kind of focusing on the area just around, because I don't want this blue spray paint to go all around the tumbler. I'm trying to do this to get this on camera for y'all too. So hopefully you guys are picking this up. Now I'm going to do the opposite side. Again, I do small spritz because I don't want to get this all over the tumbler. And that way it kind of creates that square around the cup. So I got a little crazy with this, but we'll go ahead and clean that up with the red. And so now I want to just spray this little part right here. So I'm focusing the nozzle to spray here so it can overspray around that side. With this tumbler, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So you want to make sure that you're being very careful and just take your time during this part. So now that the blue is completed, I'm now going to spray paint the red. The red is going to be a little easier, but still be careful whenever you spray paint around the blue part. So I'm just going to spray a little bit around the blue in the beginning, just to get this out the way, just to make it a little easier. And then you'll see that nice little fade effect or that not so perfect effect. That's okay. Again, this is a distressed tumbler, so you don't want this perfect, and it will be all right. So now I'm going to switch sides and then spray this area. I can't really get this on camera because I just want it just around that blue area. So I hope you guys were able to see that. And then I'm going to spray the bottom as well. I'm going to switch sides again just to get a good angle for y'all. And then I will be spraying the bottom. And I'm just doing quick little spritz. I don't want to do long spritz for this because I don't want to get out of hand and spray all over this, this tumbler. Now you see I got some of this red up here. I'm going to take my blue real quick and I'm going to spray, focus spraying away from the rim of the blue area, focus spraying towards the middle, so then the overspray will actually spray towards the red. So I just want to clean up this little bottom right here. And again, small little squirts, spritz, and there you go. And then I got some overspray on here. You can leave that or you can do what I'll do and then try to cover it up. But if it doesn't cover up, it's gonna turn out just fine and it's not gonna look bad. So now you're just gonna finish spraying this tumbler. You're gonna finish spraying all the red spots. You wanna make sure you get it nice and covered with the red so the blue or so the white isn't poking through. So take your time with this. Remember, short spritz and don't go crazy with spritzing. You notice that I'm going up and down, left and right. However you want to make this or spray this, do this as comfortable as you need to do it just to finish it and to make it look decent. So now I'm going to do the bottom. Just little short spritz. And then I'm going to let this dry. All right, y'all, I am back and my tumbler has been drying for about 30-35 minutes. So now what you're wanting to do is remove the stencil or the vinyl from the tumbler. So I just do the stripes first. You want to do this very carefully. You don't want to peel up any paint. So sometimes if you do this and the paint is still a little wet, be very careful because you might peel up the paint with the vinyl. And if that happens, just go ahead and lay the vinyl back down and then you can let it dry for another 10 to 15 minutes and try to peel it up again. Now this look is a rustic look. This look isn't meant to be a straight or clean American flag look. So if you do notice any spots that you sprayed underneath, that is fine. It's going to go along with the overall look. It's very hard to mess up this tumbler. Don't worry about the lines being completely straight or the spray paint being perfect. The great thing about this tumbler is that it isn't going to be perfect because we don't want this flag or this tumbler to have that perfect crisp look. I peeled up the stripes, the vinyl stripes. So the white, what you're seeing on here is the white tumbler. This is not vinyl, so it's white tumbler with the red stripes. And now we're going to work on the stars. The way I peel up the stars, I use my pick tool from Cricut. It doesn't have to be Cricut brand, but this is just the one that I use. And if you don't have this, you can peel it up with your fingernails or you can use tweezers, or I know and weeding tools, they also have what I call backwards tweezers. I take my pick tool and I kind of pick at the edge of the star. And then if I can grab it, I try to grab it with my fingernails. If I can't, then I kind of pick it up more. You have to be very careful with this part because you don't want to chip away the white star underneath. It's okay if you do leave little spots. Again, this tumbler isn't meant to be perfect. I did leave a little spot there that the camera isn't picking up, but that's okay. It's going to go along with the look. You also don't want to pick at the star very quickly and then accidentally miss it like I just did and then scrape the paint. So try to be careful on this part. It is very tedious. It's time consuming. But once you get it finished, the overall look looks really, really great. So I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward through this part and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next step. And I've peeled up all of my stars, all my vinyl stars on my tumbler. So what you're seeing here, The white is the Tumbler spray painted white, and the blue is the spray paint. So there's no more vinyl on this tumbler. For the next step of the tumbler or the tutorial, what you're gonna wanna do is you're wanting to make this tumbler look rustic or old or dirty. The way that I'll be doing this, it's going to be a couple of ways just so I can show you depending on what materials you may have. So I will be using acrylic paints. I have black acrylic paint and I have burnt umber. I also have nutmeg brown. Don't go out and buy these specific colors. If you have any shade of paint of black, I know they make a pavement or like a darker gray or a different color shade of brown, you have it on hand, go ahead and use it. It does not have to be the same exact color that I'm using. I'll also be using alcohol inks. I have all the shades or some shades of brown, tan, and black. So the colors I have the Espresso, which is the darker brown. I'm using caramel, and then I'm using ginger, and I also have black. I am wearing gloves for this. I do have some paint brushes on hand that I use for just my acrylic or alcohol ink paint. And then I have some napkins that I cut up to kind of smear the stuff or the inks onto the tumbler. And then I also have my makeup wipes or my, my sponges. I dab some acrylic paint onto my paper plate, and I'm just going to take my gloved finger and I'm just going to dab on some black or brown, whichever one you would like on the tumbler. And what I did was I just smeared it onto the tumbler and then I rubbed it back and forth. You're gonna see a big black spot, and then what you're gonna wanna do is just kind of keep rubbing and pressing down hard, and the more you rub, the more it's going to look faded and kind of dirty. Now again, that's with my black acrylic paint. So if I want the brown, I'm gonna do the same exact thing and then just dip my finger inside of the brown and then do the same thing. So I can do it anywhere around the tumbler. So if you saw, I just kind of wiped my finger on the tumbler and it just created that kind of like dirty look or rugged look there. So let's go ahead and do this again. So I'm just going to take my gloved finger, I'm just gonna dip it inside of my acrylic paint, and you can see I'm not using much, and I'm just kind of rubbing it on and then kind of making just a smear. I'm just smearing it on the tumbler. So that's one way how you can apply your design or your dirty look. So if you don't have anything else except for acrylic paint, this is, to me, this is my favorite way how to add the paints. It's easier for me and you use less materials, and a little bit of paint goes a long ways. So that's one way, and now I'm going to show you another way. The next way, it's going to be the acrylic paint with the paintbrush. So I have my paintbrush and then I have my acrylic paint. I'm going to dab my paintbrush and chew the paint and kind of dab the excess off onto the paper plate. And then I believe this is called dry brushing, but I might be incorrect with that term. And now I'm just going to take my brush and I'm going to lightly brush it onto the tumbler. I'm barely touching the bristles with the tumbler. So I'm just going back and forth just like so. And that is the effect that you get with the lines up and down. So if you see how that created up and down instead of this look, they're two completely different looks. So depending on what look you're wanting to go for, that's what you'll put on your tumbler. If you want this on your entire tumbler, you just go up and down on your tumbler until you're happy with it. So if you see a little bit of the acrylic paint went a long ways. And if you want to keep it this way, you can, or if you want to kind of smear it in to make it look a little more worn, then you can go ahead and do that. Again, whichever look that you're going for, this is going to be a dirty looking, worn looking tumbler, so you can't really mess it up. So again, just take your brush, dab it onto the paper plate and onto the paint, and then go ahead and just go along the tumbler. And if you notice, I did a very thick streak there, so I'm just going to rub it in. And the good thing about acrylic paint is that it does rub off very easily. So go ahead and rub that in. and it turns out very well. How you kind of see that fade effect now. I hope the camera's picking it up. So again, I did this. So let's say I added more than what I wanted. I added that streak, and I didn't want that chunk of brown. So now I'm just gonna rub it right in, and it makes kind of that worn effect. And you can see the flag is kind of more brown than it is white. Those were the two techniques that I personally use with acrylic paint. So now I'm going to show you how to do it with, how to apply the worn effect with the alcohol inks. I'm going to use the color Espresso. It is a darker brown, and I'm going to take my makeup wipe or my makeup sponge, and I'm going to dab or squeeze some alcohol ink onto it. And then I'm going to take my tumbler. I'm just going to find a spot and kind of rub it onto the tumbler, and then take my gloved hand and then rub it on the tumbler as so. So you can add as little or as much on the tumbler as you like, and this also creates that worn look. So you just dab it and then you rub. So it's basically the same thing with acrylic paint as it is with the alcohol inks. I just prefer to add the alcohol inks on with the makeup sponge because it's just easier for me. So whichever way you like, and you can add both. As you can see on this tumbler, I'm adding all three techniques just to show y'all which technique works best for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll move on to the next step. So here's how mine turned out so far. Now, if you want yours to look a lot cleaner, add less ink, add less paint. If you want it to look a lot dirtier, add more ink, add more paints. If you notice, I am touching this with my bare hands. I did not give this any drying time. There's no drying time between adding the acrylic paint and the inks to your tumbler. Whenever I am finished adding the inks and the paints to my tumblers, the next step is going to be epoxy. If you are wanting to add a decal to this tumbler or somebody's name, I do recommend to add it after the first coat of epoxy. The reason for that is because let's say you want a decal right here or right here, you're going to add that decal with that transfer tape. The transfer tape will most likely peel up the spray paint, the inks, or anything, and kind of making a square where the transfer tape was, and it may affect the design. If you have a simple decal that you don't need transfer tape with, go ahead and place the decal down. Let's say it's a heart or something. You can place that down with no transfer tape and you will be fine, and then you can epoxy. But if you are adding a name or something that needs transfer tape, I do recommend you epoxying your tumbler, waiting 24 hours after the epoxy has been applied to your tumbler. Make sure the epoxy is hard, it's not sticky. Add your decal, then epoxy right over it again.
If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more craft and tumbler videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.